Well, good evening. So I was thinking about the other day when I talked about the moral law, how I had talked about an example in my own life of that little oil slick on hot black coffee um, in styrofoam. And I'd mentioned that basically the Halakkah states that if uh, your own tradition says that styrofoam is otherwise kosher, then there are no particular kosher issues concerning to Passover proper for its continued use, but that nobody knows whether that little oil slick is kosher. So you defer to your rabbi who uh, has information from the Halakkah, which helps to make that determination. And I thought about the fact that perhaps most of our non-Jewish brethren and sistren don't really understand how that process works. I don't think any of us completely understand how the process works. It's been going on for thousands of years, and there are many, many opinions. What I do like about the Halakkah uh, is, or one thing I like about it is the fact that, for instance, in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, the all of the opinions are kept rather than just the majority. Very similar to what we have today with the Supreme Court, where we have the predominant view, and then we have those who write in agreement of it and those who write in disagreement of it. But anyway, that wasn't exactly where I was going with this conversation. But I thought I might show just a little bit about how this Halakkah works. And so, as part of my Father's Day gift, I got a book called Conservative Judaism and Jewish Law. It's an older book, maybe 50 years old. It's by Siegel, and it's published by the Rabbinical Assembly. And it basically talks about a lot of the interesting and intricate ways that something comes into Jewish law. Um, the book, in the table of contents, there are a number of interesting sections. There's one section by Mordecai Kaplan, who was the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, which is an offshoot of conservative Judaism, called The Problem of Jewish Law. Um, Jewish law as an expression of Jewish civilization. That was kind of how Rabbi Kaplan looked at Judaism, was more as a civilization rather than as simply a religion. Um, and laws as standards, the way of Takanot, authority in Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch as a guide for religious practice today. Shulchan Aruch actually means the set table, and it is basically the laws of Halakkah laid out in front of us as a set table so that we can enjoy and look into it. The synthesis of traditional and critical views, ethics, and Halakkah, and any number of other sections to read, and it sounds very, very interesting. I started it, but I have not by any means gotten hardly through it. Part 2 is responsa and analysis, law as guidance, and one of the sections, in fact the very last chapter, chapter 18, is entitled Are All Wines Kosher? And it was written in 1964 by Israel Silverman. And so it's an interesting concept. I thought it might do as well to use it as an example of exactly how the wheels of Halakkah work. So, are all wines kosher? The question many of my colleagues in the Rabbinical Assembly have asked whether it is permitted to drink the wine known as champagne. Although champagne bubbles when it is poured into a glass and therefore is different from ordinary wine, it is produced from grapes and therefore is included in the category of wine made by Gentiles, falling into two categories: wine used for offering of libations to idols, and wines which are not known whether they have been used as a dedication to an idol. Now, mind you, this is based on, I'm looking here at people from the 1500s, for example, that are writing a response to this question. So this should not really be any major woe to us as 21st century Jews. And in fact, I think we point out a few things as we go along on that. The Rabbi Moses Israelis, however, went on to state in his book Teshuvah, I have seen that there is some good to find a justification for their leniency in this matter. It is also incumbent, says the author, upon us to find some justification. So in other words, leniency is good, but we need to have some justification for that leniency. First of all, in regard to the wine of libation, wine specifically designated for ritual use, the Goanim, which are some of the great sages, I lost my place. And the majority of latter authorities have written in their responsa that non-Jews in our time are not experts on libations and their use. And this is clear that the general category of wines used in libations is probably not existent in our time, especially in America. Therefore, all wines produced by non-Jews in America are classified as non-Jewish wine. No one today denies that it is permitted to benefit from such wine, but is it permitted to drink from such wine as well? The permitted by or permitted use, that might mean, for instance, if you owned a liquor store, you're getting a benefit from selling non-kosher wine, but can you drink it? That's another question. These things of the Gentiles are forbidden and may not be eaten, though it is forbidden otherwise to benefit from them. That is bread, oil, and these are because of marriage, i.e. the prohibition against eating these foods kind of helps to separate Jews and non-Jews from additional social contact and would help to avoid intermarriage, which I thought that was very interesting. It's interesting to note that since the time when the prohibitions against eating the four categories of food mentioned above, and these are bread, oil, prepared foods, and wine, all of them except wine have become permissible. Oil, for example, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and his school permitted the consumption of non-Jewish oil because the prohibition had not been adopted by the majority of Jews, and we do not impose a decree upon the community unless the majority of Jews can abide by it. Now, this is not saying that pig fat oil or lard oil, let's say, is permitted. We are talking about non-kosher sources of these products, obviously. If you're using lard to make your bread, then obviously the bread is not kosher. That's not what we're talking about. Bread, in the time of Rabbi Yehuda, eating the bread of non-Jews was permitted. It is stated in the Jerusalem Talmud in Avodah Zarah 41d, in a place where there is no Jewish bread, the bread of non-Jews should have been prohibited, but they disregarded the law concerning this and made it the bread of non-Jews permitted because it was a necessity of life. And I think that can be said, if you're now Daniel, certainly he took the lion by the mane, no pun intended, or yes, pun intended, and just ate vegetables, etc. And it's certainly possible to do so. But most of us have to live in a world where, we have to interact with others, and we have potlucks and things like that at our works. And so we have to, in some way, be able to interact with them. So the bread, for example, leniency seems reasonable and important. And it's no longer for marriage, in that we're not breaking bread together is going to keep us from intermarrying, because we're going to see each other at the water fountain regardless. There are those who believe that this leniency also resulted from the fact that the prohibition has not been accepted throughout the Jewish community. Foods cooked by non-Jews, the prohibition against eating foods cooked by non-Jews is very ancient, even preceding the prohibition against eating non-Jewish bread. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi in his school did not permit it. The later rabbis limited the prohibition by instituting two important rules. First, any food which can also be eaten raw, for example fruit, does not fall under the prohibition of foods cooked by non-Jews. Once again, we're not talking about putting it in a lard brine. We're talking about normal food production without using non-kosher ingredients, even when it is cooked. Second, any food which is not served on the table of kings is also permitted, since it is not served to guests. In other words, you probably, well, now we might, but I guess in days of four, they did not serve pickles at the king's table. They would have if I would have been king, but I guess they didn't. And therefore, because of marriage, is not applicable. In our own day, we know that the custom of being lenient has spread to almost all Jewish homes in regard to the prohibition against foods cooked by non-Jews, to a greater extent than the rabbis permitted initially. This is especially true regarding cooked foods sold in cans and jars. Although nowadays we are seeing more and more products that are available that have a kosher hechsher, and when given the choice of two cans, one with and one without, even with identical ingredients, I always buy the one that has the hechsher. And as I point out to my non-Jewish friends, probably 2/3 of everything you eat is kosher. You just don't know it because you're just not looking for it. Moving on to the wine issue. In regard to wine, there is also an obvious lenient tendency. At first, it was prohibited to benefit in any way from non-Jewish wine. When it became obvious that non-Jews were no longer experts in libations, the authorities became lenient and permitted Jews to benefit from non-Jewish wines, although not to drink them, and we discussed this a little bit earlier. This was especially true in France, where Jews were very prominent in the production of wine for sale, and where it was customary for Jews to accept non-Jewish wine as payment for debts. In our own time, because of the reasons which follow, it seems to me that we may also permit the consumption of non-Jewish wine, which is produced in large factories. In the production of wine in modern factories, the wine is made entirely by means of machines. Because of the exigencies, I can't even say that word, of competition, contemporary wine producers are forced to utilize the most modern production techniques. Basically, no human hand comes in contact with the product from the moment the grapes are placed in the crusher until the entire process is completed and the wine is bottled um, uh, in sealed containers under the supervision of federal tax inspectors. The only exception is certain permissible handling of wine with utensils, such as when they go in and sample the wine, etc. It's done by ladle or basting syringe or something like that, and so forth. So it does not in any way come in contact with hands, Jewish or not, regardless. So basically, with that, they have said that yeah, it's okay to drink non-kosher wine in the modern era. They do mention countries where wine is still handled by non-Jews, such as where they still squish grapes with their feet and that type of stuff. And or I remember, for instance, the ice wine where we took a tour many years ago in Niagara, and they talked about getting one drop of grape out of each grape, or one drop of grape juice out of each grape in the freezing cold conditions to make ice wine. I don't know if that was done with machinery or not, but anyway, I digress. So as long as it's not handled, certainly I guess if you have a particularly religious group that does wines, makes wines, and you know they're dedicating their wine to another god or something like that, then you know that would be um, not a good idea either, obviously. But otherwise, as long as it's made by machinery and not dedicated to idols in this common age, Halakkah would probably, excuse me, conservative Halakkah in this day and age would probably allow it. One final thing is that we do tend to boil wines, especially when they come from non-Jewish sources, because that boiling apparently you cannot use as a libation or as a dedication to a god, etc., wine that has been boiled. I don't know all of these rules and regulations, but these people did. And so there are people today that even with a kosher wine will require a mavushal signature, basically stating that the wine has been boiled, so that even if a non-Jew does, let's say your non-Jewish waiter brings out your wine and on his way says, "I dedicate this to Zeus," it's boiled, so it cannot be used for that purpose. A lot of stringencies in this direction, and all wine today is technically boiled because it's pasteurized. It's only boiled for a very short period of time, but it is boiled, so therefore pasteurized wine could not be used in idolatrous practices. So it's very interesting how the rabbis came to these conclusions over the years. Now, if you go to a orthodox source, your answers are likely to be very different. Not so much with anything that I've said about the boiling, etc., but more so just whether they can be used to begin with when they're non-kosher or non-Jewish wine. So anyway, interesting stuff. I hope that gives you just a little taste of how intricate the Halakkah process is. So it's not just a matter of rabbi rolling out of bed one morning and saying, I think this coffee should be kosher and that coffee not. There is an extensive amount of research and critical thinking and argument that goes into all of this. And I'm thankful that these great rabbis over time have undertaken that so that I can pick up a bottle of wine that is made on machinery, has been pasteurized, and drink it without any fear of breaking any laws as they regard idolatry. So I hope that was helpful to you. You may think it's a little much. I understand. That's okay. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just asking you to understand it, or at least understand its existence. And thank you for listening. Shalom.